My first fun job as president is to introduce my friend. I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Rebecca Walker Reczek, who has served as SCP president this past year. As the Berry Chair of New Technologies in Marketing and Professor of Marketing at The Ohio State University's Fisher College of Business, Dr. Reczek has established herself as a distinguished leader in our field. I first met Rebecca in her early years at UT Austin when I was a second-year doctoral student at USC. We were assigned to the same project team at the Cyber Internationalization Conference, and I was immediately struck by her remarkable combination of qualities. She was passionate and brilliant, hardworking, and warm-hearted. These characteristics continue to define her today. While Rebecca excels in many roles, including as a researcher and a mother, I would like to highlight her extraordinary dedication to doctoral education. Her commitment to mentoring doctoral students is exemplified by her presidential initiative to establish the SCP Excellence in Doctoral Mentoring Awards. I believe that this program stands as a testament to her enduring impact on our field's next generation of scholars. It is my great pleasure and honor to introduce you to Rebecca.
Thank you, Vanessa, for that lovely introduction. Today, I'm going to talk to you about lay theories. Even though lay theories are something I've been studying since I was a doctoral student, I didn't necessarily plan on lay theories being a through line through so much of my research. But in retrospect, that's what they have become. But why did I decide to talk to you about lay theories today? Understanding lay theories has become, for me, a lens through which to study consumer psychology that has allowed me to study a lot of different topics that excite me, opened a lot of doors to make connections with doctoral students, with co-authors, and taught me a great deal about psychology, the marketplace, and our field. My hope today is to ignite your imagination, either around this topic or about finding your own lens in the few minutes we have together. I'd also like to talk very briefly about one lay theory about what it takes to be successful in our field that I believe may be a misbelief. Before we get to that, though, I first want to spend some time talking about what a lay theory is, as I think they're often the source of some confusion. So what is a lay theory? The best way to understand what a lay theory is to contrast it with a scientific theory. Scientists, as you know, use theories to understand, predict, and explain phenomena. So do lay people. The primary differences between scientific theories and lay theories lie in who holds them and what the theory is meant to explain. Scientific theories in the hard sciences like chemistry exist to explain the natural world. The chemist shown here is my personal favorite chemist because it's my husband, Joe. And theories give chemists like Joe the ability to understand, predict, and explain chemical reactions. We, as social scientists, develop theory to explain human behavior. In our case, as consumer psychologists, with a focus on behavior in the marketplace. Lay people also develop and use theories, but these theories are meant to help them understand and respond to their everyday world. Lay theories, then, are the theories people use in their everyday lives. Unlike scientific theories, lay theories are not developed using a rigorous process based on the scientific method. Instead, these are people's common sense, intuitive understandings of the world around them. And importantly, unlike scientific theories, lay theories don't have to be objective, testable, or true. Lay theories are people's intuitive beliefs about the world, which is why they're also called lay beliefs, naive theories, and intuitions. Lay theories also can be about any number of different aspects of one's world. Many psychologists study lay theories that people have about their social world and the self. These types of lay theories are sometimes captured by proverbs such as the early bird gets the worm. Now, you don't have to agree with this particular proverb. While it might be a problem if a room full of scientists had very different views about a key scientific theory in their discipline, reasonable people can have very different lay theories about similar phenomena. As an example of this, consider the proverbs, "You can't teach an old dog new tricks," and "It's never too late to turn over a new leaf." These are diametrically opposing views of the nature of the self. The first is a restatement of one of two opposing lay theories people might have about the self, namely the entity theory of self, the idea that the self is unchangeable, consisting of fixed characteristics that can't be altered over time. The other is consistent with an opposing theory of the self, namely the incremental theory of self, which is the belief that the self is malleable and can change over time, so that things like skills and ability can be increased over time through effort. Social psychologists believe that these lay theories matter because adopting an incremental theory of self has been linked to numerous positive downstream consequences, like better academic performance. But what about lay theories in consumer psychology? What do they look like, and why do they matter? Consumer lay theories help people understand the marketplace and their place in it. For example, consumers can have lay theories about one of the 4 Ps, including lay theories that conflict with one another. They may believe that high price equals high quality, or that high price equals low value, depending on which lay theory of price is more accessible at the time they make a judgment. Lay theories also help consumers understand when marketers are trying to persuade them and how to cope with persuasion attempts, as consumers develop lay theories about persuasion called persuasion knowledge that help them recognize persuasion tactics when marketers employ them. So lay theories in consumer psychology are about various aspects of the marketplace. But what is a lay theory? Another way to conceptualize a lay theory is that it is quite simply a knowledge structure stored in memory, one that helps people explain and understand the world around them. In consumer psychology, this includes persuasion knowledge, lay theories about inter-attribute relationships within a given product, and more, which I'll expand on at the end of my talk today. But the first lay theories I studied were lay theories about the relationships between attributes within a given product. Specifically, I've studied the idea that people believe that unhealthy foods are tastier, that healthy foods are more expensive, and that sustainable products are not as strong and effective. I thought I'd take these 3 lay theories to make a few broader points about lay theories and why they matter, and then I'll talk a little bit about how the type of lay theories I've studied has changed over time to be more expansive. First, I want to focus on how and when consumers use lay theories. Especially when it comes to lay theories about inter-attribute relationships within a given product, consumers use lay theories to make inferences of missing product attributes. A classic paradigm is to give consumers information about one attribute and to ask them to infer the value of a missing or unknown attribute without any other available information. For example, I could give you information about these granolas' prices per pound and ask you to infer their healthiness, which is what people do when asked a question like this: which granola is healthier? If you find yourself responding relatively automatically by saying it's the granola on the right, you're relying on the healthy equals expensive intuition to infer the healthiness of both granolas, which is what we find that many people in the US do. However, consumers don't use this lay theory anytime they're evaluating the healthiness of food. There's no need to use a lay theory when all attribute information is known, either because the information is present in the decision environment, or because it's a very familiar context where no inference is needed because the attribute information is stored in memory and easily retrievable. We all know that cheeseburger and fries is less healthy here. When people start to use lay theories to make inferences is when attribute information is missing, the answer is not stored in memory already, and there's nothing in the decision context that lets you infer the missing attribute. In this example, when relative healthiness is ambiguous, people rely on the lay theory that more expensive foods are healthier to make an inference about the healthiness of these foods from their prices. These lay theory-driven inferences then drive both judgments and choice, such that people choose a more expensive option in contexts like this if they have a goal to make a healthy choice. So if we think more broadly about when people use lay theories to infer missing attributes and when they don't, experts rely on lay theories less than novices because experts have more accurate and objective attribute information stored in memory that they can retrieve rather than relying on a lay theory-driven inference. Dual process models are also useful in thinking about this question, as people also rely on lay theories less when processing systematically, when they might stop and question whether a given lay theory actually applies in that context. And they rely on lay theories more when processing heuristically. That's one reason why you sometimes might hear people refer to lay theories as heuristics. Next, let's think about some of the measurement challenges presented by the fact that sometimes we admit to our lay theories, and sometimes we don't. Lay theories can be measured at both the explicit and implicit level. As an example of an explicit measure, the healthy equals expensive intuition lay theory is one that can be measured using self-reports of explicit endorsement of the lay theory. You can see from the mean here that a sample drawn from MTurk does endorse the belief that healthy equals expensive. Of course, not everyone in the given population endorses any given lay belief, so individual differences in explicit endorsement of a lay theory often moderate the extent to which people make lay theory-driven inferences. Other lay theories are beliefs that consumers may not as readily admit to having. So I've also used the implicit association test, or IAT, to assess the relative strength of intuition-consistent versus intuition-inconsistent associations. These images are drawn from the IAT I used in the Unhealthy Equals Tasty Intuition paper, where people were asked to classify a variety of images and words when the category labels at the top of the screen were either consistent with the intuition or inconsistent with the intuition. The labels you see here are the inconsistent labels, where healthy is paired with enjoyable and unhealthy is paired with not enjoyable. People are much slower to classify the IAT stimuli, which are images of foods and words describing enjoyment, when the labels are intuition inconsistent, since these labels don't reflect the actual associations consumers have stored in memory. As a result, you see differences like these in IAT scores, where people are much faster in classifying stimuli when unhealthy is paired with enjoyable, showing that people's stronger associations are consistent with the intuition. This method was useful in documenting both the unhealthy equals tasty intuition and the intuition that sustainable products are less strong and effective, as these are both lay theories that consumers may not want to explicitly admit to having because of social desirability concerns. Next, let's think about where lay theories come from. While it's difficult, if not impossible, to pinpoint the exact source of a given lay theory, we know generally where lay theories come from. First, lay theories come from sociocultural messages, including caregiver socialization. When a parent tells a child, "I know you think the Brussels sprouts don't taste good, but you have to eat them because they're good for you," they are inadvertently reinforcing the unhealthy equals tasty intuition. These are my 3 non-Brussels sprout eating children. Although, as a parent, I try to point out exemplars that are counter to the intuition, like bananas, that they think taste good and are good for them. Parental messaging is certainly one way that lay theories get propagated. We also learn to expect certain associations from messages in the mass media, whether it's news stories about the high cost of healthy food, or social media jokes about Whole Foods being nicknamed Whole Paycheck. We consistently see messages about the high cost of healthy food that underscore the healthy equals expensive association. More broadly, cultural norms and expectations are a driver of lay beliefs, meaning that lay beliefs do not necessarily replicate across cultures. I always work with US-only samples when studying lay theories as a result, and other researchers have demonstrated that some of the lay theories I've studied do not hold across cultures. As one example, Worley and Trendle found that in France, which has a very different food culture than the United States, unhealthy food is spontaneously associated with bad taste and healthy food with tastiness. So I always urge caution when taking a lay theory from one culture to another. Sometimes it may hold across cultures and sometimes it won't, fully depending on both the lay theory and the culture. We also learn associations from our personal experiences. For example, we might have tried the healthier version of a relatively unhealthy food and thought it didn't taste as good, which becomes a highly salient example. We're all biased samplers of our own experiences, and we don't necessarily retrieve an accurate record of all the foods we've tried that violate the unhealthy equals tasty intuition by being both tasty and healthy, like today's lunch. And finally, motivated reasoning can also play a role in belief in specific lay theories. Some lay theories, I believe, are a type of motivated cognition, which serve a self-protective function, or in other words, an excuse to stop us from doing things we don't want to do. For example, if I believe that healthy food doesn't taste good and is too expensive, then perhaps that allows me to avoid choosing it altogether. Moving on, you may be wondering if lay theories change over time within a given culture. The answer to that question is undoubtedly yes, which means lay theories are an interesting thing to study in a field that is rightly concerned about replication. However, to know if lay theories have changed, we need to collect data and not just assume that they have done so. To illustrate, I want to talk briefly about the sustainable equals less strong and effective intuition, better known as the sustainability liability, because this lay belief means that sustainability can be a liability in product categories where strength is valued, like a car shampoo, even while it's an asset in other categories where gentleness is valued, like a baby shampoo, which is what we showed in one of the studies in this paper. The images that you see on the screen are the images I used when I was presenting this paper before it was published. The baby at the top is my niece, who is now 16 and driving. So that gives you an idea of how old these studies are. And if you had asked me 5 years ago if I thought these studies would replicate after a decade plus had elapsed, I would have said maybe or even no, because of how much the discourse around sustainability changed in that time in the US. I really thought that the belief that sustainable products were less effective had lessened over time as more and more sustainable products were introduced to the marketplace and became more popular. But then, in February of 2020, the world woke up to the reality of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we started to see scenes like this. Here you see the cleaning supply aisle of a Target store where the only cleaner left is Method, a sustainable cleaning brand. And the headline reads, "Shoppers go green to clean because there is nothing else left." So we saw in a context where strength was truly valued as people sought to kill the COVID-19 virus, that people still appear to hold the lay belief that sustainable products are less effective. In this case, the lay theory replicates. But I think it's important to understand that as consumer psychologists, we sometimes study effects that are context-driven because what we are studying is so deeply embedded in the marketplace as it exists at that time. As a result, we would not necessarily expect these effects to replicate over time. We need to not lose sight of the fact that there are sometimes valid reasons why an effect might not replicate. Culturally determined lay theories that change as a culture changes are certainly one of those reasons. So far, I've focused on the lay theories that I've explored that are about inter-attribute relationships within a given product. But consumers hold many other types of lay theories, including lay theories about their own mental processes, like the meaning of distraction and the nature of self-control, about firms and production processes, like the belief that the scientific process is cold yet competent, or that workers at smaller firms are more intrinsically motivated. We're also seeing work on the lay theories consumers have about AI, namely the lay theory that AI is more competent than humans in making recommendations for utilitarian but not hedonic products. This is by no means an exhaustive list, as I see interesting new lay theory papers coming out all the time. But I'd like to talk briefly about the last lay theory on this list. Lay theories about what consumer actions are most effective at mitigating climate change, because this is a domain where consumer lay theories are often objectively inaccurate, to the point that I would call them misbeliefs. To identify these misbeliefs, my co-authors and I surveyed two groups of lay people, US undergrads and MTurk workers, and an international panel of climate change experts, recruited largely through the NSF, to ask them how impactful a list of 24 consumer behaviors were at reducing climate change. By and large, all three samples had high rates of believing that climate change is real and caused by human activities, 75% or greater in all three samples. So these are people who believe in climate change. What you're looking at are the means for how effective some of these behaviors were rated to be by experts versus lay people. Lay people are the two right-hand columns. These are our students and MTurkers, and experts are on the left. The results at the top in green represent the good news. These rows are where there are no significant differences in the beliefs of lay people versus experts. Both agree that using renewable energy and retrofitting your home to be more energy efficient are relatively effective actions to mitigate climate change. But look at the rows in yellow. This is where we see differences between experts and lay people. For using energy-efficient appliances and LED light bulbs, lay people think these actions are significantly more effective than do experts. These are actions that are relatively easy to do and that most consumers are already doing. So we see some evidence that consumers believe easy, accessible actions are more effective than they actually are. Compare that to downsizing your home. Experts rate this as significantly more impactful than lay people do, which I suspect stems from motivated reasoning. Most consumers don't want to downsize and think it would be very difficult. So we have a misbelief stemming from motivated reasoning, perhaps serving a self-protective function. If you believe it's less impactful, you don't have to do it. And these inaccurate beliefs stemming from motivated reasoning are even more pronounced when you look at other consumption choices. Lay people believe, probably because they want to a much greater extent than experts, that they can buy their way out of climate change by buying eco-friendly products, buying organic, etc. So what this means is that lay people have inaccurate lay theories about the relative impact of different behaviors for mitigating climate change. And this is among consumers who largely do believe in climate change. So these misbeliefs may be acting as a barrier to consumers being more effective in the actions they take to mitigate the emissions associated with their own consumption. The broader implication is that targeting these inaccurate lay theories could be an effective intervention to change behavior, and that education to correct these misbeliefs could be an important intervention to be employed in the fight against climate change, in addition to nudges and more systemic changes. So why do consumer lay theories matter? I hope I've convinced you that these knowledge structures stored in memory impact a host of outcomes that we as consumer psychologists care about, from inferences, judgments, and choice to actions related to our moral values, like steps we take to mitigate climate change. At the broadest level, I find lay theories fascinating because they impact consumers' interpretation of almost any stimuli we encounter, and they influence our interpretation of that stimulus's meaning, and hence the consumer's subsequent actions. Now that I've taken you through my journey with lay beliefs and why they matter broadly to an understanding of consumer psychology, I want to shift gears a little bit because I want to end by talking briefly about how the lay beliefs that you may hold about consumer psychology also matter. So one common piece of wisdom or advice that's passed down to early career researchers is the idea that you have to be programmatic. I know I've heard it many times, and being programmatic is certainly one path to success in the field, but this is sometimes propagated as a lay belief that you must be programmatic to be successful. When you hear this, remember that lay theories are not necessarily objectively correct. While it may look like my work on lay theories was intentionally programmatic, it was not. I was and am interested in all sorts of things, from food consumption to sustainability to consumer perceptions of science to promotions. Lay theories turned out to be a common thread that wove throughout a lot, but not all of my research, as I pursued the ideas that excited me as a researcher. I did not know I was a lay theory researcher when I was a doctoral student, despite writing the Unhealthy Equals Tasty Intuition paper during my doctoral program. The idea that you have to be programmatic to have a successful research career is, I would argue, a misbelief in some ways. For any doctoral students or early career researchers in the audience, my advice would be to not worry too much about being programmatic and instead focus on working on projects that you're truly passionate about. This is a great quote that a colleague shared with me that I think is very true, because this is exactly what happened to me as my career progressed. If you are the engine behind your papers, at some point, you will see that they connect. If you're a senior scholar in the audience, I suspect you already know this. Another great quote from a colleague captures a similar idea. You are the program. And if you're somewhere in the middle of your career and wondering how all of this applies to you, let me tell you a little more about some of the advantages I see to not being overly focused on being programmatic. It keeps you from burning out because you're open to studying new things. It makes you a better doctoral mentor because you're more open to your students' ideas. And it makes you a better, stronger reviewer for more types of papers, allowing you to better support your colleagues in their own research. Finally, I would argue that for all of us, being open to not being programmatic and not feeling bound by the lay theory that you must be programmatic gives you greater potential to have truly impactful ideas that ultimately open up new areas of consumer psychology. And in the last minute or so that I have remaining, I'd like to thank, sorry about that. I'd like to thank all of my lay theory collaborators, with a particular thank you to my co-author, who is also my advisor. That's the person in the upper left-hand corner. Thank you, Julie, for sharing all of your lay theories about the field with me, and thank you also for being here today. So Julie, you want to wave? This is Julie Irwin. Thank you, Julie. And special thanks also go to my doctoral students, who are also my lay theory co-authors. Those are the people in the middle row, all of whom are here today. Because not only did they write lay theory papers with me, but they also patiently listened to all of my lay theories over the years, hopefully figuring out for themselves which of them are true and which are misbeliefs. And finally, I want to thank all of you for allowing me to share my lay theory lens on consumer psychology with you today. Thank you also for your support during my time as SCP president. It was truly an honor. Thank you. Wow, thank you. I was not expecting that, but wow, thank you so much. I actually do have one final announcement for you guys, just a reminder about some of the upcoming events. I really wanted to highlight the Fellows Address coming up next. Meg Campbell and LJ Schrum will be presenting in the Cascade Room, so I hope many of you will be able to join us for that. That's it for today's lunch. Thank you all so much, and enjoy the conference.